Page 78. Photography only allows us to recognize objects. Looking at it, we examine, albeit unconsciously in real time, the elements it contains, and, only if everyone is known to us, are we satisfied. In the next photo, in shape and size, we recognize the steps, the door, the ashlars, the stone architrave, etc. We are not surprised because we have seen them on other occasions. Page 79. When you fix a point, you have a detailed vision of a very small region surrounding it, direct vision, and a somewhat vague perception, indirect vision, of objects placed in directions different from the one in which the gaze is fixed. This is due to the fact that the sensitivity of the retina is much greater in the macula luto than outside it, and has a maximum in the fova. In fact, the fixed point is the one whose image is projected onto the fovo. It should be noted that, since the fovo is not exactly on the optical axis, but a little more displaced on the temporal side, the direction of fixation or visual axis is slightly inclined towards the nasal side with respect to the direction of the optical axis. 3. The eye. From a schematic point of view, the eye is comparable to the camera. In fact, it is a small dark room equipped with a lens, crystalline, diaphragm, iris, and an image-holding surface, retina. While for operation it is more similar to a camera. In reality, the operation is very complex and not completely clear, but here it is appropriate to highlight a characteristic of this perfect shooting device. The sensitivity of the surface on which the image is projected is not uniform. On the retina there is an area of greater sensitivity, very small compared to the entire surface destined to receive the image and, with the exception of cases of strabismus, the optical axis of the eye intersects at the point of maximum sensitivity. The brain, through the eyes, can observe the environment with a wide angle of recovery, or focus attention on the detail, using a very small angle of recovery. In the first case the eyes remain still, in the second, they move in sync so as to make the optical axes intersect in the particular concerned. To know the shape, position and size of an object. The brain, in the first case uses the perspective, in the second the variation of convergence of the optical axis. 3.1. The perspective vision. One method that the brain certainly uses to locate objects is perspective. In the first months of life, a child encounters great difficulties in grasping objects, because he cannot locate them easily. If two objects appear only similar, it is not said that they are not the same, probably the smaller one is only further away. The child must first know the objects, memorize their shape and dimensions. Only later, by reviewing them, can he determine their position. The camera provides us with the perspectives of the objects. We can measure distances on photography only on the basis of other known metric references. Page 80. Finally, it should be borne in mind that the eye, even if without defects, offers only within certain limits images that are free of distortions. We should not be surprised, therefore, if when we look with one eye we commit gross detection errors. 3.2. Stereoscopic vision. In the absence of perspective references, to locate objects, the brain uses binocular vision and topographical triangulation, using the interpupillary distance as a basis and, at the opposite angle, the convergence of the optical axis. Our brain, therefore, through the eyes it receives two perspective images of the external world and analyzes them by points. To archive the image of what we see, we should use two cameras having the same optical geometric characteristics as our eyes, placed at a distance equal to the interpupillary distance. When what we see in the photograph contrasts with our database, we feel a sense of annoyance. A second shot of the previous one, where a man appears at the bottom right, amazes us not so much for the awareness of the real dimensions of it, but for having been deceived by the previous photograph. The photographs of Goofy and Mickey Mouse leave us indifferent until we learn that they are three different shots of the same subjects, of which not even the mutual distance has been changed. In fact, the first photograph on the left was taken with a wide-angle lens, and Pippo, who is lower, appears taller because he is closer to the photographic machine. The other two photos were taken with normal lens and telephoto lens, gradually moving the point of recovery away and then bringing the dimensional relationship back to reality. Page 81. The images on the right show the images of three spheres, apparently the same, photographed from 2 points of view distant from each other about 15 centimeters. Looking separately, but at the same time, the left photo with the left eye and the right one with the right eye, we realize that the centered sphere is the smallest and closest to us, while the upper one is the largest and the fairest. Observing, separately but simultaneously, under an angle corresponding to the shooting angle, the left photograph with the left eye and the right one with the right eye, the brain could have the same sensations of relief corresponding to reality. All this is practically impossible due to the complex functioning of our visual system. But we can still obtain a three-dimensional image by photographing any object from 2 points of view and observing, separately but simultaneously, the two photographs respectively with the right eye and the left one. The sensation of depth thus obtained will be different from the real one, but it can be varied according to the reading needs of the image. We will call the first natural or direct stereoscopic vision, and artificial or indirect stereoscopic vision that obtained by observing the pair of frames. Page 82. Caption. The images above correspond to those that can be seen by the eyes when we look at two strands stretched horizontally, without seeing the attachment points. With them our brain is unable to establish the mutual position of the threads, while it is easily able to do so if they present singular points. In the example, shown alongside, two clothes pegs were applied to the wires. Focusing first on one and then on the other, the brain establishes its position, in real time, based on the convergence variation of the visual axes. Page 83. Above, a styrovisor who, at the beginning of the century, made a fine show in the halls. Below, some pairs of stereoscopic photographs, applied on a rigid support, to be installed in the stereoscope. 3.3. The stereoscope. The systems, which maintain indirect stereoscopic vision, essentially aim to direct the optical axes of the eyes to the connected points of the pair of frames. Theoretically, after constant training, we should be able to direct the optical axes of our required eyes and in the desired direction. We could therefore observe the pair of stereophotograms without any difficulty. Gymnastics, which must be brought before our eyes, undoubtedly cannot be considered negligible if we consider certain habits. For example, when we are going to observe a nearby object, we instinctively adjust the convergence of the eyes on the point to be observed. In indirect stereoscopic vision, we should observe two photographs placed at a short distance, with the optical axes of the eyes parallel or even divergent, if the horizontal side of the photograph is longer than the interpupillary distance. Page 84. Captions. Some project drawings made by students for the realization of a stereoscope of the type illustrated on the previous page. The pair of prismatic lenses, whose task is to deviate the visual axes in order to make them parallel, was made by dividing a biconvex lens into two. Page 85. Captions. To observe a stereo pair of frames with the naked eye, we can take advantage of our ability to make eyes converge. It is sufficient to observe the tip of a pencil, placed at the minimum viewing distance, first with one eye and then with the other, and to place behind the tip the images corresponding to a point belonging to the stereo photograph. In this way the right frame will be placed on the left, and vice versa. Then, fixing his gaze on the pencil, Simply remove it to observe the three-dimensional image between the two frames, provided that the fear of remaining with crooked eyes is overcome. With a little training, not only can you do without the pencil and hold the frames in your hand, but you can also shift your attention to the various points of the stereo image. Page 86. To allow everyone a comfortable and immediate observation of the three-dimensional image obtained with a pair of frames, it is preferable to resort to particular instruments called, in fact, stereovisors or stereoscopes. The model most commonly adopted in photogrammetry is the mirror stereoscope, consisting of a pair of lenses, which have the function of focusing the image and making the optical axes of the eyes parallel, and two pairs of mirrors, intended to vary the distance. The distance between the optical centers of the lenses is variable and can be adapted to the observer's interpupillary distance. The effect of depth or relief sensation obtainable with the stereoscope increases, essentially, with the distance between the photographic points and, for the same shooting, with the magnification of the pair of images. The quality of the three-dimensional image depends on the optical observation system and the mirrors, whose surface must be such as to avoid double reflections or deformations of the image. Page 87. Caption. To the left, the Wild ST4 mirror stereoscope, equipped with 3x and 8x interchangeable eyepieces. By removing the 4 feet, the stereoscope can be inserted either in the table stand or in place of the optical group of the Wide Act 1, shown on the right. The Wide Act 1 is a tool particularly suitable for photo interpretation, equipped with a moving plane on which it is possible to fix the frames even in the case of close-up shooting, where the distance between the corresponding points undergoes considerable excursions. Thanks to a 1:5 zoom, the field of view changes from 71 mm to 14 mm in diameter, with variation of the magnification from 3x to 15.5x. JD8. To avoid any effort to adapt the observer's visual system, it is necessary to place the frames in the same orientation under the stereoscope as they had at the time of shooting. To do this it is sufficient. Print the two frames in full. Determine its center by intersecting the diagonals. Locate on each frame the point corresponding to the center of the other frame. Align the 4 points obtained in a direction parallel to the line joining the optical centers of the lenses. The distance between the corresponding points is a characteristic of the stereoscope, but generally it is around 24-25 centimeters in order to allow the observation of 23x 23 centimeters frames. Page 89. To the left, the Wild ST4 Stereoscope scheme. The distance between the observation points can vary between 56 and 74 millimeters. To be adapted to the observer's interpupillary distance, while the average distance of the corresponding points of the frames corresponds to about 25 centimeters. On the right, a summary picture of the Wild Act 1 accessories, which can be equipped with stereoscopic illumination of the mobile plane, adjustable stereo micrometer support, writing system, fixed to the moving table, for graphic recording, eyepieces to allow magnification up to 31x, connecting tube of a second optical group, to allow 2 people to observe simultaneously. System for automatic photographic shooting on single frame 24x 36 mm. Of the details observed.
90. An example of a pocket stereoscope is the Wild TSP1 having a base distance of 170 mm, a field of view of 65x 65 mm, a magnification of 23x. Equipped for a more comfortable observation, with feet and additional optics, it can bring the field of view up to 85x 85 mm with 1.5x magnification. Thanks to magnetic support bases, it can adhere to metal surfaces, which is particularly convenient when working in the countryside. For a rational analysis of the frames, it can be equipped with a device with orthogonal movements, or it can be used for the observation of uncut aerial films, in case the transport of the film in the air chamber has been done in the direction of the flight. Page 91. Captions. To the right, the orientation of the frames under the stereoscope, obtained by aligning the main points and the corresponding images. In the case of frames obtained with common cameras, it is advisable to consider the points obtained by the intersection of the diagonals of the frames printed entirely. In the frames obtained with metric cameras, on the other hand, the main points are identified by the intersection of the joining four reference brands reported on the frames themselves. Down a pair of frames of the Wild C120 stereometric chamber, on which the main point is decentralized and is identified only by two reference brands. Page 92. 3.4. Limits of natural stereoscopy. The detection system of our brain, foolproof for distances of less than 1 meter, and practically unusable in detections at a great distance. A confirmation comes from the confidence with which we move our hand to take an object and from the uncertainty with which we evaluate the speed of a very distant machine that is heading towards us. The fundamental cause of this limited scope is to be found in the convergence variation of the eyes. In fact, when we observe an object that moves away from the tip of our nose, this variation gradually passes from a maximum to negligible values. We can believe that the accuracy of the method essentially depends on the relationship between the mutual distance of the observation points and the distance of the object to be detected. Considering that the interpupillary distance, which varies from individual to individual, is around 6-7 cm and that the minimum observation distance is on average 25 centimeters, we can affirm with greater accuracy that the detection accuracy is maximum when this ratio it assumes values around 0.24 0.28. It is minimum for values of 0.06 0.07. It is not acceptable for lower values. 3.5. Pseudo Stereoscopy. If we take a three-dimensional photograph of two objects, differently distant from us, we will obtain two photographs in which the images of the two objects will appear side by side. After positioning the photograph on the right to the right and the photograph on the left to the left, measuring the distances between the corresponding images, we will notice that the one corresponding to the closest object will be less, under the stereoscope. This will cause a variation of convergence of the eyes, so as to bring us back to the real situation. If we invert the position of the photographs, the distance between the corresponding images of the farthest object and, in vision, will be less. Stereoscopic, the position of the two objects will appear inverted. This type of vision, which we will call pseudo-stereoscopic, is often difficult due to certain preventions of our brain. Caption. From the top to bottom. Two pairs of images in which the base distance ratio is respectively less than 0.01 and greater than 0.2. The difference in distance between the corresponding images of the upper and lower clips is negligible in the first case, negative but appreciable in the second, positive in the third. Which was obtained by reversing the images of the second pair, pseudo-stereoscopy. Pag 93. If we photograph an object in front of a wall, in pseudo-stereoscopy we should see it behind the wall, but this can be rejected by the brain, which is used to considering the wall as an opaque element. The experiment is better if the object is placed in front of a transparent surface and in the absence of reflected images. It is, in essence, of the same prevention that we have to overcome when we observe, in normal stereoscopy, the frames obtained with X-rays. Initially the brain encounters great difficulties in orienting itself inside a bone,